priority offers two levels of complexity to the production process with its feature set. We're going to look at the simple level of complexity, which is a warehouse assembly. No need to buy the full production features if your production processes are relatively straightforward. We're going to sell an item that itself requires assembly. We're going to fill in the details of who the customer is, and as ever, if we know the part number, we'll enter the part number, and in this case we'll indicate that we're going to make 3 of these bikes. We can check the inventory of parts, and in this case we're looking at the assembled item. There are 12 of these in inventory. So we could just go ahead and supply from inventory, but I'm going to assemble these anyway. We can also check the underlying part availabilities if we want to, but at this point I'm going to want to confirm the order which we'll accept from the customer. Once the order is in place, we can open an assembly based on that order. So this is going to create what in the full production system would be a complete work order. This is known as a warehouse assembly within the warehouse assembly feature set. So that can be picked up from within the subform called order tracing. This picks up that we've now created this assembly document which I can drill into. So this is indicating what it is that we need to make. We have a required quantity of 3 of these bikes. We've assembled 0. So now that we know how many we need to assemble, we may also want to look at details about the underlying components to the assembly process. So these are the actual components with their required quantities compared to their balance in inventory, and for that matter even a calculation of how many assemblies we could actually make. So from this we can go ahead and actually work out whether we have the right quantities in order to assemble. And once we perform the assembly, all we need to do is mark the quantity that have been assembled. If we want to associate some labour with the process as well, we just record the date, the employee. That will typically bring in the default type of work that employee does, although you can override it. You can do this in a calendar way, or you can simply record the quantity of labour that was actually involved in the process. And that's all that's required in order to complete the warehouse assembly. So we would then want to mark this as completed. And having completed the warehouse assembly, we go back onto the sales order, and if we go back up to the top level, you'll notice that the status has been changing automatically. You may have picked up that the status went to assembly opened. If we were to refresh this, it would show that the assembly is now actually completed. There's some pretty straightforward reporting to underpin the warehouse assembly. So for example, we can print reports of the assembly, and in this case, if I open this up, I can run this for any range of assembly documents. We'll display this to screen, and you'll see that everything that we've assembled can then has documents associated with it, and so if we allow it to open up, each one of the assemblies has its own page indicating the quantity that were actually made and the quantity of component parts that went into the process. And that, if we scroll right down to the very latest one that we did, you'll see the same thing with the bike. We also can look at schedules of work, so all the work that's actually been allocated to technicians for actual assembly. If you schedule it, and we haven't really looked at the scheduling, but if you schedule the individual workers, then you can run reports on their schedules. You can also look at the totality of hours that have actually been put into the assembly process. So if we pick up, for example, the reported assembly hours, there aren't many hours in here, but we'll see the structure of the report. We'll run it for one of our employees for a given date range, and it'll pick up all of the labour that's actually been done for that individual employee, and it'll show the assemblies that were being worked on. And as usual, you can drill from the report into the underlying record to find the supporting detail. So another very useful reporting feature is to view issues to assemblies. And if we pull this together for, let's bring this together for pretty much everything, what you can see is a raft of detail on the parts that were actually used for assemblies, quantities required versus actuals, the items that we were actually making, the documents for the assemblies themselves, their statuses, all remember with the drill down, so I can open up the assembly documents from the issues to assemblies, and also remember the send to Excel feature that would copy all of this information straight into an Excel table for reporting, for example, pivot table style reporting. So you can get a raft of good functionality from that.